Two midterm races in Arizona are tightening as Election Day approaches. According to a newly released CBS News Battleground Tracker, the race for governor is tied with 49% supporting both Democrat Katie Hobbs and Republican Kari Lake. In the Senate race, Democrat Mark Kelly has a slight edge over Republican Blake Masters. Both Lake and Masters have spread lies about voter fraud in the 2020 election. So Ed O'Keefe is in Tempe with more on what issues are resonating with voters there. Ed, when you're outside of the state, you talk about often we talk about much different issues. We nationalize everything when you're outside of the state. But I don't know what Arizona voters are really interested in.
Well, we'll get into that. And part of the reason we track Arizona, not only because of those close contests that you just ticked through, but also because you have Republicans up and down the ballot who are pushing those lies about the 2020 election. And they have a good shot at winning. And yet, our Battleground Tracker finds voters here don't want it to be a top issue of concern.
When I'm governor, we're going to take a sledgehammer to these damn electronic voting machines.
Kari Lake won the Republican primary for Arizona governor by fully embracing the lie that the 2020 election was stolen.
They certified a corrupt election, and that's the problem.
You would not have certified our election?
No, I would not have.
But now she's locked in a close general election and not emphasizing that issue as much.
We're going to have to do what we did in the primary, which is go out and vote and take our friends and get out there and vote like our lives depend on it.
Her Democratic opponent, Katie Hobbs, warns Lake is too dangerous for Arizona.
All of these people that Trump has given his full endorsement to because they support his big lie, they could change the rules and they could overturn the will of the voters in future elections.
But denying the results of the 2020 election isn't a top concern for voters in Arizona. According to the new CBS News Battleground Tracker poll, more than half of even Republicans say it doesn't matter.
We have so many votes outside of the law.
But it's the main focus for Republican Mark Fincham. He was in Washington, seen here in the crowd on January 6, 2021. And now he's running to be Arizona's Secretary of State. It's a job that would put him in charge of elections ahead of the 2024 presidential campaign.
That's why I'm a threat to the left. And they know they got somebody who is not going to let go of this.
Democratic candidate Adrian Fontes is especially concerned about what could happen if Fincham wins and Donald Trump runs again for president.
He may not certify an election that Donald Trump doesn't win in 2024 as well. This isn't the most important election in our lifetimes. It could be the last free election that we have in our lifetimes.
Our Battleground Tracker also finds most think abortion should be legal. And that comes as a judge has reinstated a law dating back to 1864 that ends abortion access in Arizona and would jail doctors performing them. That decision upset longtime Republican Heather Carter so much that she's now leaving the GOP.
When you talk to women in Arizona and they share their personal stories one-on-one, many of them are using this issue as the deciding factor in the 2022 election.
And in the land of canyons, cacti, and the Cardinals, just like everywhere else, the economy and inflation are the top concerns.
I see it as a businessman that we're going to hurt for the next 10 years. This giant wave that we're on is going to affect us.
Now, immigration, of course, is another big issue of concern. No surprise in this state, given how border towns especially have seen an influx of migrants. And on the issue of the 2020 elections, there's this from the poll. A vast majority of voters here in Arizona say whoever is the next governor, she needs to accept the results no matter which party wins.
Well,
Anne-Marie?
That is definitely good to hear. So let's talk about these two hot button issues, immigration and abortion. But I'll start with abortion. As you point out, because of this new ban now, basically almost all abortion has been outlawed in Arizona. This is, the Roe v. Wade issue is something that people felt would ignite Democrats to go to the polls. But is it also dividing Republicans? I thought that was really interesting what the woman in your piece said.
Yes, it is dividing them here. If you dive into the numbers a little deeper, the poll finds roughly half of Republicans wouldn't penalize a woman for having an abortion, but most Republicans favor criminal penalties for a doctor performing an abortion. And notably this, because this is where you see the split among Republicans and those that identify themselves as MAGA Republicans. 57% of those self-identifying MAGA Republicans would subject a woman having an abortion to criminal penalties. So yes, there is a divide. Is it enough to completely splinter the party on this issue or upend the results? Not necessarily, because the issue of immigration is such a galvanizing one for Republicans overall, and they support Blake Masters, the Senate candidate. They support Kari Lake, the Republican candidate for governor, and that's why these races are staying so close.
So let's talk about immigration. Give me a snapshot of the voters here. Which voters are most concerned about tougher security and why?
Republicans and right-leaning independents. They believe, again, the Republican candidates are the ones best equipped to handle those issues. And again, it's no surprise that immigration would be an issue in this state. The southern border, smaller here, of course, than it is in Texas, doesn't see overall as many illegal border crossings, but it has become an issue on those border towns, and it's an area, of course, where a lot of the border wall was being built by the Trump administration and where construction has restarted now under the Biden administration. When we talked to the Democrat Katie Hobbs in August, she understood this and said, look, I agree that the federal government needs to do a better job of policing the border. Mark Kelly, the Democratic candidate, would tell you that as well. But Blake Masters and Kari Lake, the Republican candidates for Senate and governor, talk about it far more often because they know their base of support is much more concerned about this and believes they would do a better job of tackling the issue.
And in regards to Katie Hobbs and Kari Lake, the race is also quite close between them. And, you know, some have said that part of this has to do with their general likability. How do Arizonans feel about these candidates and how they handle themselves personally?
Yeah, well, look, two measures of this, interestingly, if you look at the statewide candidates. On the question of likability, Mark Kelly, the Senate candidate, the Senate incumbent, has the best numbers of the four of them. On the question of who's the most extreme candidate, Blake Masters, the Senate candidate, comes in first, followed by Kari Lake, which is notable because Katie Hobbs, the Democratic gubernatorial candidate, has spent a lot of time calling Kari Lake extreme over the last several months. So you'd think that that would start to stick more, at least Democrats would hope so. It is, but maybe not to the extent that it is in the Senate race. And so we'll see. The big thing going for Kari Lake, you got to appreciate Anne Marie. She used to be in our line of work.
Yeah.
She was a very popular local television anchor here in Phoenix for about 20 years. She's a familiar voice and face, and that may be enough for some voters, even though she has spent her entire campaign denouncing the work she used to do and the work you and I continue to do as members of the so-called mainstream media.
Yeah, I think it depends on what your definition of extreme is, and I think that we can agree that that definition has been evolving over the past few years. Ed, thank you very much.
Yeah.